As a mysterious song about staying inside and the pitch-black king descends upon her home, a girl wonders who is singing. Recognizing the eerie melody, the blonde girl in a wheelchair gazes thoughtfully as her maid pushes her forward. A maid informs her that the singing voice belongs to the first princess's young son. The maid shares that the young master, who just turned 4, is playing in the garden with the queen. She adds that the doting queen showered the young boy with numerous presents. Hearing that they are planning a grand birthday party at the villa tonight, Lunaphilia looks on quietly. Lunaphilia politely notes that the grand gathering of relatives and nobles sounds truly lovely. Lowering her gaze, she lets out a soft, silent breath. The maid reassures Lunaphilia that it is an important day for her and assumes she simply declined the invitation, while Lunaphilia tightly grips her skirt. Bowing respectfully, the maid takes her leave and promises to return when the time comes. Left entirely alone in the quiet room, she stares out the large window from her wheelchair. She bitterly reflects on the maid's naive assumption that she had simply declined the invitation. Lunaphilia knows the painful truth that her mother deliberately excluded her to keep her hidden away from the public eye. She laments that her forced isolation is entirely due to the tragic condition of her legs. Recalling her past, she remembers falling victim to a mysterious and devastating illness at the tender age of 7. The strange sickness ravaged her body with a high fever while horrifyingly discoloring her skin from her toes upward. Despite numerous doctors examining her fragile state, no one could decipher the affliction. Plunging into darkness, she felt her consciousness slip away as the illness took complete control. Baffled by her unprecedented symptoms, every medical professional eventually abandoned her case and departed the estate. Her legs were left transformed, bearing a horrifying resemblance to blackened, lifeless wood. When the fever finally broke, the tragic aftermath left her skin permanently stained a pitch-black hue. Staring down at her ruined limbs, she realized with despair that her legs had completely stopped moving. A harsh, disgusted voice shatters the memory, calling her appearance utterly repulsive. At the grand dining table, a cruel relative expresses open disgust at having to share a meal with her. The malicious insults continue as the woman claims being near Lunaphilia makes her feel infected from the inside out. Enduring the venomous abuse with a heavy heart, Lunaphilia quietly offers a sincere apology. An older woman coldly comforts Adeline by reminding her that they will not have to look at Lunaphilia's face in a few days. The sudden revelation that she is scheduled to be married off next week hits Lunaphilia like a physical blow. A suffocating silence fills the air as the devastating weight of her family's decision sets in. Stuttering in pure shock, she struggles to comprehend the horrifying news of her arranged marriage. Panicked and confused, she desperately protests that she had heard absolutely nothing about this arrangement. Her family brushes off her distress with callous indifference, feigning mild surprise at her ignorance. Pleading for a lifeline, she cries out to her father, who sits stone-faced at the head of the table. Her imposing father casually declares that she will wed General Aubrey of the rival Desiree Empire. He cruelly demands her gratitude, stating that almost no man would ever accept a crippled woman like her as a wife. With a menacing glare, her father subtly threatens her, daring her to show any sign of unwillingness. He sternly commands her to be perfectly obedient and ensure she does not get on the fearsome general's bad side. Trapped beneath the collective, overbearing gaze of her father and her gleeful relatives, she realizes resistance is futile. Trembling with suppressed dread, she breaks and meekly submits to his terrifying royal decree. Whispers echo in the empty halls about the tragedy of being matched with an enemy general 30 years her senior. The maids gossip that sacrificing a daughter is the only way to save their defeated nation from losing its land. Huddled near the door, the servants exchange horrified whispers regarding General Aubrey's dark reputation. They trade gruesome rumors of his violent womanizing, claiming he breaks his maids' bodies until they can no longer bear children. The cruel gossips conclude that Lunaphilia's already broken body makes her the perfect, disposable plaything for his violent urges. Sitting motionless in the corridor, Lunaphilia overhears the maids morbidly wondering what the monster will actually do to her. A profound sadness washes over her delicate features as the grim reality of her impending doom solidifies. Accepting her cruel fate, she acknowledges that she must depart for the enemy empire of Desiree tonight. Crushed by the weight of her helplessness, she completely surrenders any remaining hope of salvation. She berates herself for harboring the selfish desire to choose her own path when she cannot even walk on her own. Tears stream silently down her flushed face as she completely yields to her tragic destiny. Clutching her chest in silent agony, Lunophilia wonders why her heart aches with such overwhelming sorrow. Reaching out desperately, a trembling hand grasps at the empty air in a poignant display of helpless yearning. Gazing upward with sorrowful eyes, she quietly endures the suffocating weight of her cruel reality. A desperate plea for mercy echoes through her mind as she silently begs for a reprieve. The heavy silence shatters as a sudden movement draws her immediate attention to the doorway. A familiar voice politely interrupts her mournful thoughts, excusing himself as he steps into her quiet room. Startled by the sudden intrusion, Lunophilia turns her head to face her unexpected visitor. Recognizing the loyal knight instantly, her eyes widen as she calls out Werner's name in surprise. Werner offers a profound apology with a bowed head, prompting an alarmed Lunophilia to ask what is wrong. Delivering a crushing blow, Werner reveals that the king ordered him relieved of his guard duties, leaving him only time to give his final regards. Absorbing the devastating news with quiet resignation, Lunophilia murmurs that she understands. Gathering her fractured resolve, she prepares to say a final, heartbreaking farewell. She softly acknowledges the grim reality that they will likely never cross paths again. Expressing immense gratitude, she thanks Werner for steadfastly protecting her since their childhood. Offering a bittersweet smile, she declares him the absolute most reliable knight she could have ever asked for. Forcing a brave facade, she silently vows to endure her harsh future entirely on her own. Werner gazes deeply at her, completely heartbroken by the cruel injustice of her impending departure. Taking a sudden, determined step forward, the loyal knight respectfully approaches her wheelchair. Uttering her name with solemn reverence, Werner breaks the heavy, agonizing silence between them. Reaching out with a steadfast gaze, he presents her with a precious, final gift. Gently placing the carefully wrapped object into her delicate hands, he completes his final duty. Staring down at the mysterious parting gift, Lunophilia gently unwraps it with trembling fingers. Astonished by the beautiful trinket, she breathes out a quiet gasp as she recognizes it as an exquisite necklace. Werner firmly explains that he specially commissioned the piece, embedding it with a powerful protective warding stone. Bowing deeply, he earnestly prays that this physical manifestation of his loyalty will forever guard her. Clutching the glowing stone tightly against her chest, a visibly moved Lunophilia thanks him from the bottom of her heart. A glimmer of hope returns to her eyes as she tearfully admits the gift grants her true courage. Turning away with a heavy heart, Werner finally leaves her solitary chamber forever. A somber carriage rolls steadily through the desolate, rain-soaked wilderness toward the enemy empire. The torrential downpour violently batters the dark carriage as it presses onward into hostile territory. Huddled quietly inside the violently swaying cabin, Lunophilia stoically endures the treacherous, miserable journey. The carriage driver shouts through the raging storm, remarking on the utterly atrocious weather. Urging her to rest, the driver warns that the lack of towns guarantees they will not arrive until tomorrow. Thanking the driver, Lunophilia cynically reflects that the blinding rain conveniently masks her mother's shameful political sacrifice. Staring blankly out the window, her mind drifts back to another similarly stormy day from her tragic past. Flashes of horrific memories surge to the forefront as the nostalgic drumming of rain unlocks her darkest moment. She vividly recalls the horrifying night her legs turned completely black and paralyzed, leaving her weeping in solitary despair. The haunting, rhythmic lyrics of a familiar song about the pitch-black darkness suddenly echo through her mind. Remembering the terrifying verse about the King of Night, she surprisingly recalls how the distant melody actually brought her mysterious comfort. Acknowledging the deeply unsettling lyrics' warning against stepping outside, she remains transfixed by the vivid memory. The song concludes with a grim promise of no return, yet she fondly remembers the singer's strangely gentle vocal tone. Soothed by that enigmatic lullaby, her terrified younger self had finally drifted into a peaceful, much-needed slumber. Lulled by the carriage's rhythm and the haunting memory, her heavy eyelids begin to slowly flutter shut. Just before sleep claims her, she quietly wonders about the true identity of her mysterious savior. Complete darkness envelopes the panel as Lunophilia finally succumbs to exhaustion in the swaying carriage. A sudden, violent jolt fiercely rocks the entire carriage, brutally snapping her awake. The terrified horses let out a piercing shriek, violently rearing back in the torrential downpour. Disoriented and panicked, Lunophilia cries out in shock while the driver desperately shouts her name. A deafening, blood-curdling shriek rips through the storm as a monstrous force violently intercepts their path. The carriage crashes to a catastrophic halt, leaving Lunaphilia completely at the mercy of an unseen terror lurking in the night. Lurking in the treacherous wilderness, vicious bandits spot the noble's carriage and gleefully celebrate their wicked luck. A grinning thug stalks toward the vehicle, mocking his terrified prey by sneering that her mother clearly failed to teach her basic survival. He coldly finishes his taunt, reminding her of the lethal dangers that haunt the roads at night. Panic erupts as the desperate driver screams a warning about the ambush while wildly attempting to escape the trap. Swarming the carriage, the ruthless attackers evaluate their prize and calculate the hefty ransom she will fetch on the black market. A massive brigand menacingly approaches, declaring that he will personally judge exactly how much her miserable life is worth. Violent hands rip through the darkness to brutally drag the helpless girl from the shattered safety of her transport. Paralyzed by overwhelming terror, Lunaphilia realizes with crushing certainty that she is going to die. Surrendering to despair, she bitterly accepts that surviving would only condemn her to a bleak existence as a mindless, manipulated doll. Embracing the impending violence, she quietly hopes that her worthless existence can finally reach its bitter end. She fully submits to the fatal ambush, completely ready to abandon her empty and hollow life. Suddenly, a terrifying presence violently interrupts the slaughter to freeze the bandits in absolute, unadulterated dread. The heavy air thickens with malicious intent as a towering, unnatural figure emerges from the absolute darkness. A profound silence instantly dominates the chaotic battlefield as the mysterious entity completely commands the space. Staring down at the frightened girl, the formidable stranger effortlessly identifies her as the youngest daughter of Harlazan. The majestic and terrifying figure looms over the shattered carriage, radiating an aura of unstoppable doom. Trembling in the mud, a bewildered Lunaphilia desperately questions the imposing shadow's true identity. The towering entity boldly proclaims himself the absolute ruler of the ferocious monsters infesting the Black Forest. His booming voice shakes the earth as he declares himself the sole bringer of death on the night of the new moon. A horrific, awe-inspiring visage reveals itself beneath the pale moonlight, completely paralyzing everyone who gazes upon it. He smirks down at his trembling audience, officially introducing himself as the legendary King of Night. Horror washes over Lunaphilia as she instantly recognizes the dread title of the mythical demon king from local folklore. She recalls the chilling rumor that claims absolute death visits anyone foolish enough to witness his true form during a new moon. A suffocating tension grips the clearing as the demon king silently evaluates the broken girl lying before him. Summoning a fractured shred of courage, Lunaphilia looks up into the monster's eyes and boldly voices a final request. Staring death in the face, she shockingly begs the fearsome king to mercilessly execute her. She justifies her desperate plea by coldly stating that there is absolutely no point in continuing her pathetic existence. Stripped of all hope, she confesses that she harbors no dreams or future and solely desires eternal rest. Begging for release, she implores the demonic sovereign to honor his fearsome reputation as the ultimate grantaire of death. She completely surrenders her soul to the terrifying beast, desperately asking him to let her pass on. A single, desperate plea for death escapes her trembling lips as she awaits the final strike. The King of Night halts his advance, coldly analyzing the pathetic aristocrat sobbing in the mud. He softly speaks her full name, letting the heavy syllables of Lunaphilia Harlazan echo through the quiet forest. Shattering her morbid expectations, he flatly informs her that her dark wish has already been fulfilled. Leaning closer with a mocking glare, he promises that even without his lethal intervention, she is completely doomed. He cruelly pierces her fragile psyche, bluntly asking if she is not already a walking corpse. Confusion flares in Lunaphilia's eyes as the king relentlessly interrogates what she has actually accomplished with her life. Answering his own brutal question, he confidently assumes she has done absolutely nothing of value. He mercilessly dissects her empty existence, mocking her for desiring nothing and choosing absolutely zero paths for herself. He brands her a pathetic, wallowing princess who lazily allows the people around her to completely dictate her fate. Delivering the final verbal blow, he demands to know where the actual life resides in such a cowardly, passive existence. Igniting with sudden, uncontrollable fury, Lunaphilia violently hurls an object straight at the arrogant demon's face. The unexpected projectile strikes its target, momentarily breaking the fearsome ruler's imposing facade. Amused by the sudden defiance, the King of Night chuckles and praises her fiery spirit for a supposed dead person. Furious tears stream down Lunafilia's face as she viciously glares at the monstrous king who dared mock her pain. Screaming through her sobs, she fiercely defends her humanity by declaring that even she possesses burning desires. She lashes out at the arrogant sovereign, furiously demanding what a monster could possibly understand about her endless suffering. Unleashing her deepest regrets, she wails that she desperately wants to stand on her own 2 feet, walk the world, and experience life. Slamming her fists onto her paralyzed limbs, she breaks down completely, crying that her useless legs trap her in a perpetual prison. The Demon King reacts with genuine shock, utterly caught off guard by the sheer magnitude of her explosive emotional outburst. The classic black and white manga aesthetic beautifully captures a breathtaking establishing shot of the night sky as the narrative abruptly shifts gears. Sweeping through the dark, turbulent clouds, the monstrous entity effortlessly carries the helpless girl high above the perilous forest. Gripping her fragile form tightly against his chest, the intimidating king of night soars fiercely through the crisp nocturnal air. Breaking the tense and terrifying silence, the formidable demon ruler bluntly asks Lunafilia what it is she supposedly cannot do. Glancing down at his trembling, terrified captive, he gruffly commands her to hold on tight before she plummets to her absolute doom. Startled out of her despair by his sudden instruction, the bewildered princess lets out a tiny squeak of pure confusion. Suspended thousands of feet in the freezing air, Lunafilia slowly opens her eyes to behold the sprawling, magnificent world far below. A sweeping, meticulously detailed black and white manga landscape reveals a breathtaking moonlit vista stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Stuttering in absolute shock, her trembling voice barely registers a sound as the staggering panorama completely overwhelms her fragile senses. Gaping in sheer awe at the sparkling city lights far below, she breathlessly confesses that she has never witnessed something. A radiant, genuine smile finally breaks across her sorrowful face as she finishes her heartfelt thought, calling the spectacular view truly beautiful. Bitter memories of her tragic confinement wash over her as she reflects on being hidden away indoors every single day since her legs originally succumbed to their dark affliction. Basking in the incredible aerial scenery, she confidently asserts that absolutely no one trapped within the royal castle has ever witnessed such a miraculous view. Overcome with profound, unexpected gratitude toward her demonic captor, she opens her mouth to utter a deeply sincere thanks. Heavy, unbidden tears of pure joy stream down her face, glistening brightly against the striking black and white manga shading. Leaning in with an eerie, predatory curiosity, the King of Night abruptly licks a teardrop from her cheek while musing aloud about the salty taste of a human woman's sorrow. Flustered and utterly horrified by his shocking intimacy, a bright blush spreads across Lunafilia's face as she frantically screams at him to explain his bizarre actions. Staring deeply into her panicked eyes, the monstrous sovereign sternly declares that her cheap life is currently far too insufficient to warrant the mercy of his lethal strike. Claiming absolute, unyielding ownership over her mortal soul, he commands her to serve him faithfully as his personal captive until her life force is entirely spent. A sinister, terrifying shadow falls over his imposing visage as he dramatically outlines the inevitable arrival of her final moments. Sealing her dark fate with a chilling promise, the Demon King swears that when the end finally comes, he will execute her with his very own hands. Miles away in a grand manner, a seasoned older knight stands rigidly within the flickering candlelight of a quiet, oppressive study. The somber atmosphere thickens considerably as an authoritative figure critically assesses the downcast, heartbroken young warrior standing before him. Breaking the agonizingly heavy silence, the commanding father firmly and sternly calls out Werner's name. Stepping menacingly closer, the older man's piercing, judgmental gaze intensely locks onto his emotionally compromised subordinate. Cutting straight to the brutal heart of the matter, Werner's father bluntly points out that the young knight is deeply, undeniably in love with Princess Lunafilia. Werner flinches heavily at the painfully accurate observation, his profoundly conflicted heart laid entirely bare in the classic black and white artwork. His father sharply reminds him that he was merely 12 years old when he was originally appointed as the fourth princess's dedicated personal guard. The elder knight furiously argues that allowing royal blood to be married off into hostile territory without a single protecting knight brings disgraceful, unforgivable shame upon their entire prestigious order. Desperately trying to defend his helpless inaction, a devastated Werner stammers that he was already officially relieved of his protective post. Interrupting his son's pathetic, cowardly excuse, The father shrewdly emphasizes that the royal dismissal only takes official effect precisely as of today. A fierce, rebellious spark suddenly ignites in the older man's eyes as he points out the crucial loophole that today has not yet officially ended. Ordering Werner to immediately ride out and fulfill his true duty, the commanding father bravely vows to personally handle the king's inevitable, furious wrath. Reinvigorated by his father's bold, treasonous support, Werner's previously shattered expression instantly hardens into one of absolute, unyielding determination. Whispering her beautiful name like a sacred, desperate prayer, the young knight silently vows to reclaim his beloved Lunephilia. He passionately reflects deep within his soul that every single breath he has ever taken has always been solely dedicated to her. Spurring his mighty steed forward into the raging storm, he solemnly confirms that his lifelong, burning devotion has never wavered for a single second. Tearing violently through the torrential downpour, Werner rides furiously into the pitch-black wilderness on a desperate, suicidal rescue mission. The intense black and white manga aesthetic perfectly captures the chaotic spray of mud and pouring rain as the heroic knight pushes his horse to its absolute physical limits. Arriving abruptly at a grim, devastated intersection, Werner violently halts his galloping mount as a horrifying sight suddenly emerges from the thick fog. He stares in absolute, blood-chilling terror at the viciously massacred bandits and the totally obliterated wreckage of the royal carriage. Falling heavily to his knees in the blood-soaked mud, an agonizing, heart-wrenching scream tears from his throat as he frantically screams Lunephilia's name to the empty, uncaring sky. Far removed from the gruesome, rain-swept massacre, a massive, shadowy fortress looms ominously against the bright, oversized moon. The imposing king of night gently descends from the dark clouds, safely depositing the startled princess onto a vast, Gothic balcony. Glancing nervously at her eerie, unfamiliar surroundings, Lunephilia asks where they are, prompting the demon ruler to simply reply that this is his personal nest. The dark ruler towers dominantly over her small, wheelchair-bound frame, casually asserting his total, unquestionable dominance over the terrifying environment. Adding an ominous, chilling caveat to his previous territorial statement, the monstrous king steps aggressively closer to his paralyzed captive. Confused and utterly intimidated by his overwhelming, suffocating presence, she lets out a nervous, wavering stutter. Flashing a wicked, predatory grin, he boldly declares that from this exact moment forward, his dark fortress is officially her nest too. Flushing brilliantly with a mix of fierce indignation and overwhelming embarrassment, she wildly yells that he absolutely cannot just unilaterally decide such things. Sitting in somber silence, the blindfolded girl rests delicately behind the massive, bleached skull of a horned beast, enveloped by an oppressively dark and textured void. Desperation shatters her silence as she weakly begs her captor to let her go home. The dark entity immediately questions the very concept of her home, casting chilling doubt on her desires. A jagged, shadowed hand menacingly lifts her chin, forcing her to face him as he demands to know why she would ever need to go back. Horned form, the demon interrogates her about whether there was ever even one good thing in that place, intensely pressing her on what that castle actually meant to her. The girl falls utterly silent, her profound lack of response speaking volumes. She declares that her misery at home doesn't mean she wants to be with him, quickly following up by demanding how he even knows about such intimate details of her life. A sudden, sharp sound startles her into a frightened gasp as the tension in the room rapidly thickens. Shattering her confusion entirely, the demon reveals the devastating truth that her condition is actually a dark curse. Delving deeper into the dark revelation, he explains that the one who put a curse on her legs is the notorious woman known as the Witch of Lust. The smirking witch holding a caged skull, he describes her as a selfish madwoman with a loose screw who cares only for her own desires, expressing that it is sickening even to speak name. The young girl stares blankly ahead, completely stunned as she quietly repeats the word, curse, while processing the horrific truth of her existence. As the demon casually sets down a glass potion bottle containing a dark heart, she asks why a witch like that would ever curse her. Dismissing her profound question with a slight turn of his head, he flatly admits that he doesn't know because he has never even met the woman. Turning his dark, flowing hair back toward her, he coldly states that he simply cannot understand the mind of a crazy woman. The girl casts her eyes downward, enveloped in a somber realization as the heavy truth finally settles around her. From behind his horned silhouette, the demon's voice cuts sharply through the silence with a singular, conditional word. Gathering her courage, The girl asks if she meets that witch and has her break the curse, will her paralyzed legs finally be healed? Her ultimate vulnerability fully exposed, she repeats her desperate hope, wondering aloud if she will ever be able to walk. Staring intensely in response, the demon straightforwardly asks if she truly wants to go to the witch. He immediately tempers her fragile hope by warning her that there is no absolute guarantee her legs will actually be healed. Reflecting on her tragic life of immobility, she mournfully admits that she has given up on so many things because of those cursed legs. As the demon casually lounges across the ornate bed, the girl asserts her resolve, claiming that if there is a reason for her suffering, then she has a fundamental right to know. The horned demon stares back in lingering silence, his expression unreadable as he deeply contemplates her sudden burst of determination. Breaking the tense quiet, he lazily concedes that he supposes he could take her to find the witch. His expression suddenly sharpens into a predatory smirk as he introduces a dangerous caveat to his generous offer. Suddenly lunging forward to pin her aggressively against the headboard, he demands to know what she will do, assuming he helps her heal her legs. Trembling under his dominating presence as she grips the bedsheets, she stammers out a fearful question about what he could possibly want. Flashing a wicked, fanged smile, the demon leans in dangerously close and asks what a fragile creature like her could possibly do for him. Trapped and terrified, her eyes widen in sheer panic as she realizes her utter helplessness in figuring out what she can offer. He relentlessly taunts her past, assuming she has done nothing until now, while harshly questioning where the actual life is in her existence. The girl clenches her jaw and turns away, beads of sweat betraying the agonizing truth of his incredibly harsh words. Closing his eyes, the demon softens his intense posture and quietly agrees that she is completely right. He listens as she pours out her heart, confessing that she is ignorant of the world, gave up on everything because she thought she had no choice, and just let herself be swept along without doing anything. Amidst her tearful confession, a newfound spark of resolve ignites brilliantly as she declares that she has finally realized something crucial. With absolute clarity cutting through her despair, she passionately proclaims that she desperately wants to heal her legs. Tears streaming down her determined face, she aggressively states that what she wants is a future where she can walk on her own feet, deciding she will do whatever it takes to achieve that reality. Offering herself entirely, she bravely tells him to do as he pleases if her body is the price, tragically noting she was already destined to be an enemy general's plaything anyway. She adds a remarkably bitter caveat, wondering out loud if he is okay with taking such a discarded hand-me-down. Her fist trembles violently on the white sheets as the demon's sharp, shadowy claws slowly creep toward her fragile hand. A low, dangerous growl rumbles from the powerful demon as he directs a menacing glare directly toward her. Looming completely over her pinned body, the tense, dark atmosphere is suddenly and comically shattered by the loud rumbling of her extremely hungry stomach. Both the fearsome demon and the terrified girl freeze entirely, their faces drawn blank in sheer, unadulterated shock at the horribly timed sound. The demon erupts into boisterous laughter, mocking her spirited stomach for someone who claimed to want to die, while the violently blushing girl screams that it can't be helped because she hasn't eaten anything in so long. Wiping a tear of pure mirth from his eye, the highly amused demon relents and promises to get some food ready for her. Looking upward toward the darkened rafters of the Gothic room, he casually calls out the names Teto and Rita. High above in the pitch-black shadows of the ceiling, two pairs of tiny, glowing eyes suddenly snap open in eager response. Two adorable, shadow-like bats immediately detach from the wooden rafters, fluttering down eagerly toward their master's call. Relaxing casually on the bed, the demon watches as the girl points at the flying creatures in total bewilderment, questioning if they are bats. One of the ecstatic bats aggressively nuzzles her face with heart-shaped affection as she screams in utter confusion, overwhelmed by the chaotic revelation that it has found a human. Swarming the bewildered girl, a tiny bat excitedly screeches about seeing a human for the first time while another scolds Teto for bothering her. The towering demon casually instructs the girl to let the bats, Teto and Rita, take care of her needs. Confusion washes over the girl's face as she softly questions what he means by taking care of her. She stares incredulously at the tiny, fluttering creatures, openly doubting how such small bats could possibly help her. A sudden, magical poof erupts in the stark black and white manga aesthetic, completely engulfing the two bats in a cloud of thick smoke. From the dissipating smoke, the bats instantly transform into two adorable, humanoid attendants eager to serve. Awestruck by the sudden transformation, The girl breathes out in pure amazement, wondering aloud if she just witnessed actual magic. The newly transformed attendants immediately bombard her with questions, eagerly asking if humans eat omnivorous diets, if she likes fruit, and if hunger grips her. Observing her overwhelming bewilderment, the demon lets out a soft, amused humph from the shadows. Leaning back with a smirk, he notes with satisfaction that she finally acts like her true self. Presenting a steaming bowl, the attendants proudly declare they made their favorite apple soup just for her. The girl gently pats their heads, offering a sincere thank you that instantly melts their hearts. Basking in the affection, the attendants excitedly share this marks their first time getting head pats while the girl marvels at the soup's delicious smell. Just as the attendants cheerfully wish her a good appetite, a large hand abruptly intercepts the bowl. Frustration flares in the girl's eyes as she glaringly accuses the demon of acting truly mean. Shrugging off her anger, he nonchalantly claims the owner's duty demands feeding a newly acquired pet. Lifting a spoonful of the warm soup, he mockingly orders her to open wide. The girl freezes entirely, clamping her mouth shut as she stares at the spoon in absolute shock. She aggressively insists she can eat by herself, but the demon flatly denies her any food unless she accepts it directly from his hand. Taunting her hesitation, he cruelly questions what happened to all the fierce spirit she displayed just moments ago. He challenges her resolve, demanding how she expects to offer up her body if she lacks the courage for a simple feeding. Cornered by his harsh logic, she finally relents with a defeated stutter and takes the bite. She chews the soup in tense silence, the rich flavor completely contrasting with the intense, overbearing atmosphere. Swallowing the food, she quietly admits the soup tastes quite good, prompting a smug acknowledgement from her captor. To her absolute horror, the demon suddenly demands she take her turn feeding him. She stammers in wild confusion, demanding an explanation, to which he smoothly replies her hunger has simply spread to him. The demon leans forward expectantly, silently forcing her to reciprocate the intimate gesture. Trembling with embarrassment, she points out he still holds the spoon, desperately trying to avoid the task. He sharply insists she use the very same spoon Lunaphilia just ate from, escalating the tension in the room. Trapped by her own ambitions, Lunaphilia internally rationalizes he surely refuses to take her to the witch if she disobeys. Stealing her resolve, she reminds herself she already decided to do absolutely anything to heal her cursed legs. Gripping the spoon tightly, she pauses and quietly asks what name she should use for him. Meeting his intense gaze, Lunaphilia points out a powerful being like him must possess a name. The demon stares back in silence, letting the heavy weight of her question hang in the thick air. Breaking the quiet, he finally reveals his true identity, declaring simply his name stands as Cain. Gathering her shattered courage, Lunaphilia tentatively raises the spoon toward the fearsome king of night. Cain leans in and accepts the food, his piercing eyes tracking her every nervous movement. Suddenly, a massive, shadowed hand moves stealthily toward her waist. Lunaphilia gasps slightly, immediately feeling the sharp, dangerous pressure of Cain's claws resting against her fragile waist. She stares at Cain, deeply contemplating how this king of night supposedly reigns as a terrifying monster who brings only death. Her mind races with the conflicting reality that this demon king violently took people's lives and abducted her. Yet, meeting his deep, mysterious eyes, a profound sense of calm inexplicably washes over her. She silently questions why she feels far more at peace in the grasp of a monster than she ever did in that cold, lonely castle. The narrative violently shifts to a distant memory, recalling the very first time a young knight met Lady Lunaphilia at 12 years of age. A solemn knight respectfully begs pardon, announcing his official assignment as Lady Lunaphilia's personal guard by order of the captain of the knights. The older knight steps aside, formally introducing a young boy named Werner to serve as her protector from this day forward. Commanding the boy forward, the knight firmly orders Werner to introduce himself to the young lady. Young Werner steps into the light, his posture stiff and highly disciplined for his young age. He bows deeply in a flawless display of absolute respect and unwavering duty. Pledging his undying loyalty, the boy humbly asks for her acquaintance, officially introducing himself as Werner Friedrich to Lady Lunaphilia. A solemn voice echoes through the stark, black and white manga panels, gently calling out Lady Lunaphilia's name. Standing in the high-contrast courtyard, young Werner questions why the reclusive fourth princess, rumored to possess cursed black feet, absolutely never leaves the castle. He stares intently at her frail, heavily inked silhouette, wondering why someone completely isolated from the world would ever need a dedicated guard. Smiling gently with a beautiful, monochrome radiance, Lunophilia warmly greets Werner upon their very first meeting. Looking back on that fateful day shaded in heavy ink, an older Werner tragically reflects on his profound ignorance. He bitterly admits he still didn't know the royal family and retainers utterly despised her, leaving the fragile girl completely alone in the sprawling estate. The young knight also remained completely unaware that terrifying enemies surrounded the vulnerable princess on all sides. Suddenly, a cruel splash of dirty water violently ruins the princess's pristine white dress, heavily contrasting against the stark black ink of the panel. Stepping from the shadowy foreground, a haughty noblewoman mocks the stunned girl with a highly insincere, feigned apology. Displaying immense cruelty, the malicious woman sneers that she completely didn't notice the princess there and entirely never expected her to come to the courtyard. Continuing her venomous assault, the woman ruthlessly remarks that the filthy dress getting dirty is perhaps just as well. Twisting the cruel knife deeper, the noblewoman loudly declares the stain a perfectly fitting color for Lunophilia's pitch-black feet. The young princess gasps in silent, agonizing humiliation as the devastating words pierce her fragile heart. Bursting onto the tense scene with bold action lines, a panicked Werner urgently cries out Lady Lunophilia's name. He desperately apologizes for stepping away from her side, but the gracious princess gently assures her horrified guard that it is completely all right. Looking down at her tragically stained lap, she somberly explains that her elder sister absolutely dislikes dirty things. Accepting the cruel abuse with heartbreaking resignation, she quietly murmurs that it simply cannot be helped with her cursed feet. Werner clenches his teeth in absolute, white-hot fury, deeply moved by the tragic injustice unfolding in the starkly drawn courtyard. Without a single second of hesitation, the young knight boldly scoops the paralyzed princess directly into his strong arms. Shocked by the sudden, sweeping movement, Lunophilia stammers Werner's name in pure, wide-eyed bewilderment. She frantically begs him to put her down before he gets dirty too, but he firmly and instantly declares he doesn't mind at all. Staring ahead with unwavering, deeply shaded conviction, Werner fiercely reminds the princess that he is her dedicated knight. Blushing softly beneath the classic screen tone shading, the princess whispers a deeply heartfelt thank you to her valiant savior. Gazing up at him with immense, tear-filled gratitude, she solemnly declares that he is the only one truly on her side. The heavy, emotional weight of her words strikes Werner's core, forcing him to quietly repeat the solemn realization to himself. He fiercely internalizes that he alone stands by Lady Lunophilia in this hostile castle, permanently vowing to be the sole support for the lonely lady. A powerful, undeniable fire ignites within his dark eyes as he silently swears to surely protect her forever. Snapping to the grim present, an investigator gravely reports finding countless scattered black feathers and several dead bandits around Lady Lunophilia's carriage. Deepening the dark mystery, a surviving maid claims a terrifying black shadow boasting large wings and massive horns violently abducted the princess. A stern commander intensely repeats the ominous description of wings and horns, his face shadowed with extreme dread. The seasoned commander gravely notes that the shadowy forest in question has long been completely rumored to harbor dangerous monsters. Connecting the terrifying omens, he grimly deduces the culprit must undeniably be the mythical king of the night spoken of in ancient poems. Werner's blood runs entirely ice-cold as the terrifying title of the King of the Night echoes ominously through his racing mind. Refusing to yield to paralyzing fear, the commander officially orders a search party immediately dispatched to rescue Lady Lunophilia from whoever the enemy may be. Werner's ambitious father commands him to aggressively rescue Lady Lunophilia and earn all the credit before Lady Desiria's rival search party finds her. Urging his tense son forward, the father insists that gaining a royal title will bring immense honor to their family name and undoubtedly open up brilliant new prospects. Bowing his head in strict, rigid obedience, Werner firmly accepts the heavy mission with a resolute and final affirmation. Consumed by intense, crushing guilt, Werner furiously chastises himself for leaving her side, knowing he was the only one who could truly protect her even after being relieved of his guard duty. Gripping his sword hilt with white-knuckled determination, he silently vows to brave the ink-black shadows and bring her back safely. Desperation and blinding duty completely collide as he fiercely swears to the heavens that he will absolutely save Lady Lunophilia. The manga panel sharply transitions back to the dark demon castle, where Lunophilia suddenly lets out a strained groan of severe discomfort. Crushed beneath a massive, immovable weight on the bed, she weakly complains about the intense heaviness suffocating her fragile form. Flushing with pure embarrassment, she internally panics over intimately sharing a bed with a non-human monster simply because no other beds exist in the Gothic room. Suddenly, the chaotic, bold sound effects of tiny, rapid footsteps echoing across the dark stone floor completely shatter the tense silence. Bursting into the room with explosive, hyperactive energy, Teto excitedly calls out to Lunaphilia while claiming to have found something incredibly great. Struggling helplessly beneath Kane's massive, heavily muscled arm, Lunaphilia desperately begs Teto for help while the bat amusedly asks if she is simply having fun. Bewildered by the fearsome lord's incredibly deep slumber, Lunaphilia quietly questions if the terrifying Demon King is actually just a massive sleepyhead. Floating comfortably in the starkly inked room, the attendant plainly explains that Lord Kane is entirely nocturnal to begin with. Adding to the sudden slice-of-life comedy, the bat logically notes that this bright time of day naturally makes the Dark King incredibly sleepy. Bouncing with relentless, undeniably cute energy, Teto cheerfully declares a strong desire to play during the day regardless of any nocturnal habits. Bursting with hyperactive energy in the high-contrast manga panels, Fifi's attendant urgently calls out Fifi's name while exclaiming that he found something incredibly neat. Gasping in pure shock, Fifi gazes upon the classic black and white illustration of a beautifully crafted wheelchair. Beaming with joy, Teto proudly confirms that this is exactly what humans like Fifi use, prompting her to offer a deeply heartfelt thank you. Tracing the stark inked lines of the chair, Fifi curiously asks why the demons would possess a human wheelchair in this dark domain. Hovering in the heavily shaded room, the tiny bat reveals that humans actually lived in this very tower long ago. Rita and Teto cheerfully explain that they learned how to read and cook from abandoned human books, noting that all sorts of human tools were left behind. Fluttering excitedly across the monochrome page, the bats passionately declare their love for humans because of their vast knowledge and incredible abilities. Lowering her gaze beneath the heavy screen-tone shadows, Fifi softly murmurs in quiet understanding. A stark, silent panel beautifully captures Fifi's deep, melancholic reflection as the crushing weight of her own helplessness entirely settles over her. Breaking the heavy silence, Teto softly stammers as he attempts to pronounce the young girl's full name. Smiling gently through the dark ink, the princess warmly assures her tiny friends that either Fifi or Lunaphilia is completely fine to use. Bouncing with renewed enthusiasm, the bats announce they are about to prepare today's meal and eagerly ask Fifi if she is already hungry. Surrounding her with vibrant action lines, the bats excitedly assume Fifi must be an amazing cook simply because she is a human. Fifi completely freezes, her wide eyes reflecting profound hesitation against the intricately detailed, dark background. Lowering her head in deep shame, Fifi apologizes profusely and admits she truly wishes she could confirm their incredibly high expectations. Clenching her fists, the tragic Fifi confesses that she has never cooked a single meal in her entire life. She timidly offers that if there is absolutely anything she can actually do, it would only be embroidery. The two bats completely freeze midair in absolute, comical shock at Fifi's unexpected revelation. Shattering their grand illusions, the bewildered bats ask Fifi if there are truly things humans cannot do. Quickly recovering their boundless joy, Fifi's tiny attendants excitedly suggest cooking together and cheerfully declare she is just like them. Soaring through the classic black and white kitchen, Fifi's friends happily proclaim that cooking is an incredibly fun adventure. A beautifully detailed, classic manga spread reveals Fifi smiling warmly as she prepares to boldly tackle the kitchen alongside the bats. Gripping the thick dough with intense determination, Fifi vigorously kneads the mixture on the heavily inked table. A brilliant flash of white heat intensely radiates from the dark, heavy iron oven as Fifi carefully bakes her culinary creation. Suddenly, a massive, explosive blast of pure manga action lines violently erupts directly from the massive oven door. Fifi violently recoils in sheer, unadulterated terror as the massive explosion violently shakes the entire kitchen. Choking on the thick, heavily shaded smoke, Fifi desperately screams out to ask what on earth is going on. While Fifi hysterically cries that she followed the exact recipe, Fifi's amazed bats excitedly watch the literal fireworks and call her amazing. Stepping through the dense smoke, Lord Kane suddenly arrives and sternly demands to know what all this massive commotion is about. The bats gleefully report that Fifi's kneaded bread literally explodes in the oven, marveling that they have absolutely never seen exploding bread before. Blushing furiously beneath the soot, Fifi frantically screams at them to stop staring because she is obviously just failing, while the bats continually worship her as incredibly cool. Kane inspects the bizarre rock-like bread core left behind after all the dough blew away, coldly comparing the lump to a solid chunk of lead. Lowering her head in absolute defeat, Fifi utterly crushes her own spirits by explicitly labeling the baked goods as a total failure. She tragically notes that every single one of the black manga-styled lumps is entirely too hard for anyone to eat. Staring down at the intensely inked tray, Fifi bitterly condemns her creations as pitch-black failures. Suddenly, Kane's massive, shadowed hand reaches out and boldly grabs one of the burnt lumps directly from Fifi's tray. Without a single moment of hesitation, the mighty demon king violently tosses the solid black mass directly into his mouth. Fifi's jaw utterly drops in pure, unadulterated horror as she helplessly watches Kane bite down on the rock-hard bread. Desperately screaming for him to spit the inedible food out, Fifi is completely ignored as Kane suddenly bursts into deep, resonant laughter. Flashing a dangerous, fanged smirk, Kane casually informs Fifi that it is entirely too late because he already ate it. He casually analyzes the ruined meal, noting it was indeed as hard as bronze and completely impossible for anyone to normally eat. Leaning in with overwhelming swagger, Kane confidently clarifies that the pitch-black meal would only be fatal for an ordinary person. Puffing her cheeks in an adorable, classic manga pout, Fifi crosses her arms and angrily accuses Kane of eating her food without permission. Amused by her unexpected defiance, Kane chuckles deeply and sharply points out that Fifi suddenly possesses quite a sharp tongue. Bending aggressively closer to her face, Kane confidently asserts that he is probably the only one in the entire world who can actually survive eating her cooking. Fifi's heart visibly skips a beat as she stares up at the towering demon, her wide eyes completely softening in sheer surprise. Breaking the intense romantic tension, Kane casually observes that Fifi is completely covered in dark soot from head to toe. Reaching out a massive, clawed hand, Kane gently commands Fifi to come closer so he can completely clean her up. Gathering mystical energy within the stark monochrome panels, Kane smoothly invokes the magical incantation for the cradle of the gentle breeze. Fifi gasps in pure, spellbound wonder as the gentle, magically shaded wind suddenly envelopes her fragile form. Relaxing peacefully in the soothing bathwater, the heroine softly expresses her wistful desire to wield magic after Rita the maid marvels at its amazing utility. The ethereal magic utilized by Teto and the others vividly materializes as majestic harpies, mermaids, and centaurs channeling their arcane abilities. Resting her head affectionately, Rita casually explains that their magical process simply involves politely asking various elemental spirits of wind, fire, and water to graciously lend their power. Rita humbly clarifies to the attentive heroine that their inherent magical power remains weak, meaning the wondrous feats they perform do not actually stem from their own personal strength. Reflecting on past culinary attempts like Fifi's hated black bread, the heroine silently realizes that she overwhelmingly prefers doing things entirely by herself even if she ends up failing. Reminiscing about the earnest effort involved in her past endeavors, a gentle smile crosses her face as she admits that the experience was genuinely fun and she truly liked it. Observing her wistful expression, Rita thoughtfully questions her sentiment while a memory of a horned girl laughing about the sheer difficulty of the task flashes in her mind. Suddenly remembering her duties, the dutiful maid Rita cheerfully hops off her stool and announces she will swiftly bring the bathing heroine some fresh clothes to wear. Peeking warmly from behind the wooden doorframe, Rita kindly instructs her to wait there, promising to find some older but completely unused garments for her. Left alone in the tranquil silence of the washroom, the heroine sits pensively amidst the gently rippling bathwater as the serene atmosphere envelopes her completely. Staring softly at the shimmering surface of the water, she absent-mindedly murmurs to herself that the simple exertion was surprisingly fun. She contemplates how she spent every grueling day in the castle enduring the harsh gazes of those around her, effectively surviving by sealing away her fragile emotions. Trembling slightly under the weight of her resurfacing trauma, she lightly touches her bare chest as droplets of bathwater cascade down her delicate shoulders. Gazing upward with a deeply melancholic expression, she tragically realizes that she had long forgotten what it actually meant to experience genuine joy. As water drips continuously from her damp hair, a creeping anxiety washes over her as she wonders if the shocking news of her sudden disappearance has finally reached the royal castle. Acknowledging her family's profound apathy, she bleakly assumes her cruel mother and sister are likely relieved by her absence and may have already conveniently declared her dead. Sinking slightly deeper into the comforting warmth of the porcelain tub, she sorrowfully recalls that there was exactly one person who was entirely different from the rest. A sudden, striking vision of a fierce, protective gaze pierces through her lingering thoughts as the beloved name of Werner desperately escapes her lips. The steadfast memory of Werner overwhelmingly consumes her mind, firmly cementing the undeniable truth that he was perpetually dedicating himself to protecting her. The handsome knight Werner in his immaculate uniform manifests in her memories, reminding her that in that unforgiving castle, he was the absolute only one who stayed loyally by her side. Lowering her somber gaze to her cupped hands, a heavy wave of guilt washes over her as she realizes her sudden, unexplained absence must be causing him agonizing worry. Tenderly grasping the dark, ornate jewel resting against her collarbone, a genuinely fond and deeply affectionate smile graces her softened features. Closing her eyes in serene devotion, she firmly grasps the magical protective stone Werner gifted her, earnestly hoping that his precious keepsake continues to vigilantly protect her. Her peaceful, private reverie is abruptly shattered when a sudden, sharp clattering noise echoes ominously from the other side of the changing screen. Glancing curiously toward the decorated partition, she innocently calls out to her missing maid, asking if Rita has already returned with the promised garments. Remaining completely oblivious to the encroaching danger, she politely extends her voice to ask for some much-needed assistance. She finishes her gentle request, politely asking to be gracefully helped out of the massive bathing tub. Instead of the cheerful maid, a towering, immensely intimidating man with sprawling dark hair and demonic horns menacingly materializes before her. Her breath violently catches in her throat as her eyes widen to the size of saucers, letting out a stunned, terrified gasp at the horrifying intrusion. A suffocating, utterly paralyzing silence stretches between them as the imposing demon's intense, predatory gaze remains terrifyingly fixed entirely upon her vulnerable form. Stammering in absolute mind-numbing shock, she weakly attempts to formulate a coherent sentence but can only manage a breathless, fearful stutter. Trembling violently against the porcelain rim, she manages to force out a terrified, barely audible whisper demanding to know why this monstrous intruder is suddenly here. Ignoring her desperate, panicked question completely, the towering demon steps imposing closer to the edge of the tub and utters a dangerously low, gravelly greeting. His piercing, demonic eyes immediately lock onto the gleaming jewel resting on her bare chest, aggressively demanding to know exactly what the object around her neck is. An explosive surge of visible, unbridled fury violently contorts his striking features as a sudden, horrific realization violently clicks behind his intensely glaring eyes. Roughly seizing her fragile, trembling shoulder with his massive, clawed hand, he terrifyingly identifies the lingering essence of a human male radiating from the stone. His deep, menacing voice drops into a distinctly predatory growl as he viciously reiterates that he can vividly detect the repulsive smell of a human male on her. Leaning his horned head terrifyingly close to her damp neck, he aggressively snarls that the lingering scent is an incredibly foul and utterly unpleasant smell. He venomously admonishes her for wearing such a disgusting human trinket, revealing with dark irony that he initially came only to check if she was pathetically crying. Moving with terrifying, blinding speed, his powerful fingers ruthlessly hook beneath the delicate silver chain of her cherished necklace. His towering frame radiates pure, unadulterated possessive rage as he bluntly and violently declares his absolute hatred for the object. With a sudden, horrific yank, the fragile chain violently snaps with a sharp metallic clatter, ripping Werner's precious protective stone completely away from her neck. He tightly crushes the newly stolen pendant within his unforgiving clawed fist, sneering down at her with a terrifyingly cruel and darkly triumphant expression. Thrusting her hand forward in a desperate, panic-stricken plea, she cries out for the cruel demon to immediately give her precious lifeline back. Seething with dark, undeniable jealousy, the demon relentlessly interrogates her, violently demanding to know exactly who this human man named Werner actually is to her. Closing the agonizingly small distance between them until they are practically touching, his fangs bare as he fiercely roars a terrifying command for her to immediately answer him. Completely paralyzed by his suffocating, demonic aura, she desperately struggles to form words, weakly gasping that her strained throat hurts too much to properly speak. The agonizing, burning sensation of her ruined vocal cords sticking together, She fiercely declares that Werner is her beloved knight who has loyally protected her since they were always together. Panicked face as she desperately labels Werner as her absolute most precious person, completely overwhelmed by a terrifying sensation that she can no longer breathe. Silencing her desperate, agonizing cries, the imposing demon forcefully grabs her delicate jaw and violently captures her lips beneath the rippling water. Desperately pleading in the stark black and white manga panels, she violently begs the towering demon to stop his aggressive assault. Struggling against his immense and inescapable grip, she weakly demands that he immediately let her go. A sudden and terrified gasp escapes her trembling lips as the incredibly intense situation violently escalates. The oppressive atmosphere thickens dramatically as she remains completely helpless against his overwhelming physical dominance in the shadowy room. A startled and agonized cry violently breaks the heavy silence as she visibly recoils from his terrifying advance. She lets out another breathless and high-pitched gasp, completely overwhelmed by the terrifying proximity of her demonic captor. Pure panic violently floods her racing thoughts as she tragically realizes her precious necklace from Werner is in grave danger. She breathes heavily as her racing heart pounds with sheer, unadulterated terror in the starkly contrasted black and white scene. The painfully fragile nature of her existence becomes agonizingly clear under his crushing and inescapable dominance. Towering over her with chilling malice, he coldly and ruthlessly dismisses any knowledge of her beloved knight. Mocking her protector's utter incompetence, he viciously points out that a truly capable man would never have allowed her to end up in this miserable situation. A heavy and suffocating silence stretches menacingly between them as his incredibly cruel words pierce straight through her fragile heart. Utter shock violently ripples through her devastated expression, leaving her completely stunned by the brutal truth of his harsh and unforgiving statement. Choking back agonized and wretched sobs, she desperately struggles to endure the horrifying physical and emotional torment of his relentless assault. With hot tears streaming down her face, she despairingly accepts the incredibly cruel reality that she can never escape his demonic grasp or go anywhere. Pleading desperately for a single shred of mercy, she cries out that she should at least be allowed to keep one precious memory of her past. Her heartbreaking and desperate plea hangs uselessly in the cold air as it is completely ignored by the unforgiving demon standing over her. The stark and heavily inked shadows of the room swallow her quiet sobs as strange, echoing ambient sounds reverberate through the terrifying darkness. Abruptly releasing his terrifying grip, the demon coldly and decisively declares that he has completely lost all interest in her. Bursting frantically through the doorway, a panicked voice urgently and loudly screams out Fifi's name. Rushing desperately to her battered side, the deeply shocked maid urgently asks what happened upon seeing Fifi visibly bleeding. Fifi weakly attempts to reassure her that she is fine, even as Rita horrifiedly spots a fresh and glaring wound on her delicate neck. Fifi winces softly and lets out a pained gasp as the excruciating realization of her fresh injuries finally sets in. Comforting her battered and traumatized friend, Rita sorrowfully notes that the cruel and bleeding wound is evidently still stinging her. Clutching her bare and injured chest, Fifi agonizingly laments the tragic and heartbreaking destruction of Werner's precious protective necklace. Ignoring the sharp physical pain of her split lip, she tragically admits that the sheer heartbreak of the sudden loss hurts infinitely more. Trembling with deeply ingrained trauma, she quietly and sorrowfully reflects on the horrifying violation of experiencing such a brutal assault for the very first time. The classic black and white panels seamlessly transition into a quiet and incredibly somber moment of silent reflection and lingering dread. She remains completely lost in her dark and haunting memories of the brutal, life-altering encounter with the demonic lord. The relentless and agonizing passage of time slowly blurs her immediate terror into a deeply lingering and inescapable heavy dread. Harsh and highly contrasted sunlight eventually filters through the castle windows to signal the dreaded dawn of yet another incredibly tense day. Fifi sits entirely still in her secluded room as she nervously anticipates the terrifying and inevitable return of her demonic captor. Glancing anxiously toward the empty doorway, she mentally and cautiously notes that the terrifying demon is completely absent yet again this morning. Acknowledging the passage of several tense days without seeing Kane, she realizes she should logically feel immensely relieved to avoid facing him. Despite the peaceful physical reprieve, a deep and gnawing sense of unease leaves her turbulent feelings incredibly complicated and entirely unresolved. She stares blankly at the highly contrasted walls while silently grappling with the confusing and violent storm of lingering emotions raging inside her. Cheerful and upbeat voices suddenly shatter the tense silence as her caretakers brightly announce they have warmly brought her morning breakfast. Forcing a polite and strained smile onto her face, Fifi graciously and quietly thanks Rita and Teto for their incredible morning kindness. The deeply loyal maids carefully set down the warm meal as their bright expressions subtly and quickly shift to genuine, deep concern. Observing her deeply troubled and exhausted demeanor, they gently and cautiously point out that she hasn't seemed well lately at all. Fifi immediately lowers her sorrowful gaze to desperately attempt to conceal the lingering and painful trauma of Kane's brutal attack. Pressing gently for desperately needed answers, the maids softly call Fifi's name with genuine and heartfelt concern radiating from their voices. Stunned by their incredibly sudden intuition, Fifi reacts with absolute shock as they bluntly ask if she is secretly worried about Lord Kane. Quickly and firmly dismissing their incredibly hopeful suggestion to make up, Fifi adamantly denies that reconciliation is the actual issue at hand. Her racing mind violently flashes back to the incredibly terrifying and deeply oppressive aura Kane radiated during their violent encounter. Rationalizing her deeply ingrained dread, she quietly and solemnly admits that they were never exactly close to begin with anyway. A terrifying and freezing shiver runs down her spine as she vividly and horrifyingly recalls the sheer, freezing hostility of his cold gaze. Comparing the brutal incident to their initial forest meeting, she openly admits that his recent and explosive anger was infinitely more terrifying to behold. Completely bewildered by his intense rage over the broken necklace, she remains tragically and hopelessly clueless as to why he was actually so furious. Resigning herself to her incredibly grim fate, she darkly concludes that she has absolutely no choice but to completely obey him no matter what he mercilessly does. Reflecting on her injured leg, Lunaphilia bitterly admits her desperate willingness to do absolutely anything to heal it despite her recent bold claims. Staring helplessly at the daunting structure before her, she painfully acknowledges the harsh reality that she cannot even climb the imposing tower alone. A heavy realization violently washes over her fragile spirit as she remembers that simply leaving the oppressive castle did not solve her underlying problems. Gazing out into the desolate landscape, she tragically concludes that escaping her former prison does not inherently mean she is truly free. Deep, highly contrasted black and white shadows cling tightly to the eerie environment as she silently grapples with the crushing weight of her seemingly inescapable destiny. A sudden and terrifying atmospheric shift violently shatters her quiet introspection, forcing her to cast her fearful gaze toward the darkened horizon. An eerie and deeply ingrained childhood poem violently echoes through her racing mind, ominously warning of a pitch-black darkness that arrives exactly once a month. Hearing a sudden, unsettling noise cutting through the heavy silence, she terrifyingly recalls the dark legend proclaiming that the King of Night violently descends. The chilling and rhythmic verses continue to aggressively haunt her thoughts, strictly warning against wandering outside during this terrifying supernatural event. A massive, imposing shadow suddenly and completely engulfs the starkly drawn scenery, violently interrupting her frightened recollection with sheer physical dominance. The haunting poem reaches its grim and fatalistic conclusion, aggressively promising that rule-breakers wandering into the dark will never return home again. Her delicate eyes widen to the absolute size of saucers as she breathlessly gasps the name of the terrifying demon Kane materializing suddenly before her. The towering demon fiercely locks his piercing gaze onto her trembling form, his deep and menacing voice heavily resonating as he violently speaks her name. An oppressive and utterly suffocating silence violently stretches between them as the stark manga shading emphasizes his overwhelming and inescapable physical dominance. Recalling her previous desperate pleas, he bluntly and ruthlessly reminds her of her tragic declaration that she cannot escape him or go anywhere. Leaning terrifyingly close to her fragile face, he calmly asks in a chillingly low tone if she genuinely dislikes her current captivity here in the dark. Trembling violently under his intense and predatory scrutiny, she remains completely paralyzed and utterly unable to immediately form a coherent response. Mustering a tiny fraction of her shattered courage, she weakly attempts to speak up, but her fragile voice violently catches in her dry throat. Kane aggressively cuts off her stuttering, boldly revealing his deep knowledge that until this very moment she was entirely unable to ever leave the oppressive castle. He coldly and ruthlessly exposes her most intimate secrets, vividly describing how she would tragically cry alone at night over her cruel, inescapable fate. A sudden surge of deep demonic frustration violently twists his striking features as he angrily admits her passive acceptance of the abuse deeply irritated him. Lowering his booming voice into a fierce and absolute growl, he violently declares that her true place was completely and utterly never meant to be within those stone walls. Pausing for a brutally tense and dramatic moment, the powerful demon lord openly admits a rare and startling miscalculation in his usually flawless dark judgment. He intensely continues his striking revelation, stating he never imagined there was something in that wretched castle genuinely important enough to actually make her cry. Commanding her to critically re-evaluate her fragile existence, he bluntly and ruthlessly reminds her that a human's time is incredibly short and must be used carefully. In a shocking and unprecedented twist that violently shifts the heavy atmosphere, the towering lord calmly offers to safely send her back to her kingdom if she truly wishes it. Cementing his incredibly surprising offer, he absolutely guarantees she will be expertly escorted somewhere completely safe without sustaining a single physical injury. The harsh and heavily inked lines of his expression tighten dramatically as he begrudgingly and forcefully adds that he will even deliver her straight back to her beloved knight. A sudden and intense narrative shift violently alters the heavy tension as he powerfully presents the massive alternative of choosing to stay with him instead. He makes an incredibly monumental and passionate vow, violently promising to tirelessly search for a way to completely break the devastating curse binding her injured leg. Locking his intense and fiery demonic gaze firmly onto hers, he swears to dedicate himself completely to her recovery until that damaged leg is fully and perfectly healed. In a breathtakingly powerful and romantic declaration that shatters the oppressive darkness, the terrifying Lord of Night completely pledges to become her magnificent wings. The imposing demon fiercely demands a final and absolute answer, aggressively commanding Lunophilia to boldly choose exactly which divergent path she truly desires. His heavy and commanding voice violently echoes through the stark shadows, forcefully challenging her to finally discover and decide where her true place lies. Overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his monumental ultimatum, her wide and tearful eyes rapidly dart around the beautifully rendered black and white scene. The fierce and swirling midnight wind powerfully whips her delicate hair as she desperately wrestles with the most incredibly important and life-altering decision of her existence. The unbearably tense narrative abruptly and violently shifts away from the dramatic tower to reveal heavily armored knights intensely investigating the desolate wilderness. A tense subordinate knight nervously addresses his commanding officer, stuttering slightly as he attempts to swiftly report back to the formidable Captain Werner. Holding up a massive and ominous black feather, the scout urgently confirms it perfectly matches the dark evidence found exactly where the princess was abducted. The grizzled captain tightly grips the dark feather, grimly and violently concluding with absolute, unwavering certainty that there is no possible mistake. A dramatic, cinematic wide-angle shot ominously showcases the impossibly tall and dark tower looming menacingly against the starkly contrasted sky. Gazing fiercely at the imposing structure with unyielding resolve, the determined knight powerfully declares that Lady Lunophilia is absolutely trapped inside that very tower.